Hey guys, I'm Spencer, and this is the Best Bite Kitchen. Today I'm gonna make a chocolate and raspberry cake inspired by the Great British Baking Show. So I'm gonna start by buttering my cake pans. I like to use butter and flour sometimes, but when you're making a chocolate cake, it's important to use cocoa powder instead of flour just to make sure you don't get any lumps of flour or little white specks that don't really look good on a chocolate cake. And then I like to use a parchment circle just for extra insurance. Next I'm gonna get my dry ingredients ready. I'm using Preppy Kitchen's mocha cake recipe. The link is in the description. You want to make sure when you're measuring your flour to fluff it a little bit before you measure it, and instead of scooping with the cup that you're measuring with, I like to spoon it into that measuring cup and then use a knife to scrape off the top. So I'm getting my flour, sugar ready. All my other dry ingredients, I'm going to sift those together and give them a little bit of a whisk. So I have my wet ingredients here. One thing that's special about this cake is that the chocolate cake has coffee in it. I always like to put coffee in my chocolate cakes just because it really brings out the chocolate flavor. I also love to pair raspberry with chocolate. It's just a great combination because the raspberry is kind of sharper against the more rich chocolate. So I have my hand mixer here, and I'm just gonna pour my wet ingredients into my dry. Give that a bit of a mix. I don't wanna mix it too much just because the longer you mix the wet with your dry, because there's flour in there, you're gonna develop the gluten. So every moment you're whisking that batter, you're making the cake a little bit tougher because of that gluten that's developing. This is starting to look really good, so I think I'm gonna stop here and get it ready to go in the oven. I love to use a ladle to put my cake batter into my pans. I'm starting out with 3 ladles full in each. This just makes it so much easier than trying to weigh it or just eyeball it. So I just do about 3 ladles in each and then come back and add 1 or 2 more if there's any batter left. This is looking good, so I'm gonna put it in the oven now. I always set a timer for the minimum amount of time, so that's 35 minutes for this recipe. I'm gonna start making my chocolate ganache now. I'm using 60% bittersweet chocolate because I don't want it to be too sweet, because the cake is going to be sweet, the jam is going to be sweet, so I want to think about the balance there. Just giving these a bit of a chop just to get them nice and small chunks so that when I mix them with my cream they melt easily. I'm going to take my cream and my chocolate and mix it together in a food processor just to chop up that chocolate and help it melt into the cream. So I'm cooling it off in this ice water bath just to get the ganache cooling to a consistency that I can start to whip up into a sort of frosting texture. So something I noticed with the ganache is that when I started whipping it up, it still seemed really runny. So what I ended up doing is I added some powdered sugar to help kind of stabilize it, kind of like a normal frosting, but it's still got that rich chocolate flavor. So I'm gonna take out my cakes now. They're looking really good. I'm gonna tip them out onto a wire rack just to start cooling. I'm taking my jam now. I heated it up a little bit in the microwave just to make it a better consistency for spreading onto my cake layer. So I'm gonna do that with the first layer, spread a thin layer, not too much, just enough to give some extra raspberry flavor and keep that cake nice and moist. I can take my frosting now and spread a thin layer on top of that jam. I like to use a turntable because it makes layering up the cake a lot easier, and then if you get the turntable messy, it's fine because you're just gonna transfer the cake onto a cake plate anyway, so it just makes it more stress-free. For the top layer, I like to make sure it's upside down on the top of that cake, just to make sure it's nice and flat, because you don't really want a dome at the top of your cake, because then it doesn't look as smooth and neat and professional. Now I'm going to dab some of this frosting on, kind of swirl it around, try to give it kind of a rustic look. And then I'm going to top with the raspberries. You want to put lots of raspberries. I think it really brings a nice addition to this cake. Just that fresh raspberry flavor really goes well with that chocolate. So if you've watched the Great British Baking Show, you might be starting to recognize this cake. It's actually the cake from the Great British Baking Show intro. It's a show that I really love and have been watching and rewatching for years. It's actually one of the things that got me into baking years ago. Just kind of inspired me and made baking seem really fun and interesting.